India's #1 news network. And you're watching News 9. English news as it should be.
Very good morning. Thank you so much for tuning in to News 9. This is Morning Brief at 9. I'm Karthik Malhotra. Well, the big story that we're tracking for you this morning comes all the way from U.S. President Donald Trump, who's saying help is on its way. That's his message to protesters in Iran. And also on the show, as committed by the new U.S. Ambassador to India, Sergio Gore, there was a phone call held between External Affairs Minister S Jaishankar and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. We'll tell you all about what they spoke on that phone call. And of course, markets continue to be a little jittery. FII exits continue to carry on as three big events, the Q3 earnings, the Indian budget, and of course, the tariff continues to loom uncertainty over investors' mind. All this and more on this edition of Morning Brief at 9. This is Morning Brief at 9, and this Wednesday morning, these are the headlines we're tracking for you. U.S. President Donald Trump urges Iranian protesters to continue demonstrations and take over institutions, hints at U.S. intervention, says help is on its way. India unlikely to face major impact from Trump's proposed 25% tariff on Iran trade as bilateral ties remain limited, say government sources. China warns of countermeasures as Trump's 25% tariff threat on countries trading with Iran puts Beijing's oil imports and strategic interests at risk. External Affairs Minister Dr. S Jaishankar speaks to U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Both leaders review key areas of bilateral cooperation, including trade, critical minerals, nuclear energy, defense, and energy. India set for a strong showing at Davos with ministers, chief ministers, and top CEOs as Trump to lead the largest ever U.S. delegation to the World Economic Forum this month. India plans to discuss a 3.25 lakh crore rupee deal to buy as many as 114 Rafale jets from France, with 30% made indigenously. Proposal includes 12 to 18 jets for the Indian Air Force in flyaway condition. World Bank sees India's growth easing to 6.5% in FY27, but says strong domestic demand will offset impact of global challenges and higher US tariffs. India's auto exports hit record high in 2025 as passenger vehicles and two-wheeler shipments surge on strong global demand. And Delhi Airport to face airspace curbs on Jan 26th and 29th for Republic Day events. Non-scheduled flights barred during specified hours. Top story this morning, U.S. President Donald Trump has urged Iranian protesters to continue their demonstrations, promising them that help is on its way. Now, this statement comes amid reports that nearly 2,000 people have been killed in a crackdown following weeks of anti-government protests in Iran. Now, President Trump issued his message directly to Iranian demonstrators on Truth Social, calling them Iranian patriots and urging them to keep protesting and take control of state institutions. He warned that those responsible for killing and abusing protesters would pay a big price and said he has cancelled all meetings with Iranian officials until what he called the senseless killing stops. Now, the most striking line, however, was Trump's declaration that help is on its way without offering any details on what that assistance might involve. Now, while it remains unclear what help is on its way specifically means, the message marks a major escalation in the already strained relations between Tehran and Washington. Remember, just a day earlier, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said he remained in contact with U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and that communication channels between Tehran and Washington were still open. Meanwhile, speaking to the media, Trump said he is seeking accurate numbers on what he described as significant killings in Iran and has warned that he will act accordingly. Now, Trump further declined to spell out what form of U.S. response might take, keeping Washington's next move deliberately ambiguous as tensions with Tehran continue to rise. Listen in.
Iran is on my mind when I see the kind of death that is happening over there, we think. So we're going to get some accurate numbers. I'll have it in about 20 minutes. We'll get some accurate numbers as to what's happening with regard to the killing. The killing looks like it's significant, but we don't know yet for certain. I'll know within 20 minutes. So,
on sanctuary cities,
and we'll act accordingly.
Do you want to see democracy in Iran?
Ideally, you'd like to see it, but what we want to see is we don't want to see people killed. And we want to see a little bit of freedom for these people. These people have been living in hell for a long time.
Meanwhile, India's trade and economic engagement with Iran remains limited and is unlikely to face any major fallout from the latest tariff threat issued by the United States President Donald Trump, according to Indian government sources. Now, Trump has said that any country doing business with Iran will face a 25% tariff on its trade with the United States. But officials in New Delhi say India's exposure is minimal. Iran does not even feature among India's top 50 trading partners. Now, last year, India's total trade with Iran stood at around $1.6 billion, accounting for just 0.15% of India's overall trade. The government sources also expect this figure to decline further in the coming financial year due to broader external economic pressures. India's exports to Iran are largely humanitarian in nature, dominated by food items and pharmaceuticals. Officials say it is still unclear whether Trump's proposed tariff would apply to such trade, which traditionally falls outside of U.S. sanctions. The Federation of Indian Export Organizations has said Indian companies and banks are in full compliance with U.S. Office of Foreign Assets Control sanctions, engaging only in clearly permitted humanitarian transactions. FIO has, however, sought explicit clarification from Washington to remove any ambiguity. Now, notably, previous U.S. sanctions imposed in 2018 had already caused a sharp drop in the India-Iran trade.
We have to see because Chabahar trade is an investment-related decision, and in the past, India has sought sanctions exempted on the Chabahar port, and the development of the port has started. We have to see to what extent this kind of executive statement which has been given will apply to the Chabahar port, and accordingly a call may be taken. So as of now, when he's talking about additional 25% tariff, probably it is not applying to the development of Chabahar port, which is not something related to the trade, which is related to the investment and development of infrastructure.
Staying with the tariff story coming by the U.S. President Donald Trump on countries which are doing trade with Iran. Now, China, the largest buyer of Iranian oil, has warned it could take countermeasures in response to Donald Trump's decision to impose 25% tariff on countries that continue to trade with Iran. Now, reacting on Tuesday, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson said there are no winners in a tariff war and Beijing will firmly safeguard its legitimate and lawful rights and interests. Analysts say the threat has sent shockwaves through Beijing, given its reliance on cheaper Iranian oil and concerns that Trump's tariffs could undermine energy security and broader strategic interests. China has indicated strong opposition to what it calls unilateral coercive measures, warning that tariffs and trade wars will not resolve global disputes and emphasizing the need to protect its own economic position amid rising global tensions. But U.S. President Donald Trump says he believes China can open its markets to American goods. Speaking to reporters, Trump said the U.S. is doing very well with China and expressed confidence that greater access for U.S. products is likely, citing his strong relationship with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Listen in.
That deal opened Chinese markets to U.S. goods. It protected intellectual property. Can we get back to that?
Yeah, we can. We're doing very well with China. I have a great relationship with President Xi, as you obviously know. We're doing really well. We're making a lot of money with China.
Can you open their markets to U.S. goods?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it's going to happen.
Meanwhile, the European Union is considering additional sanctions against Iran, the bloc's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, said on Tuesday. Now, Kallas made these remarks during a visit to Berlin, speaking alongside German Defense Minister as concerns mount over Iran's crackdown on protesters. Listen in.
The heavy-handed and brutal response by the security forces is unacceptable and exposes a regime afraid of its own people. The EU already has sweeping sanctions in place on Iran, on those responsible for the human rights abuses, nuclear proliferation, and Tehran's support for Russia's war. And we are discussing on putting additional sanctions.
All right, and now on to the next big story that we are following this morning. External Affairs Minister Dr. S Jaishankar held a telephonic conversation with the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio on a range of key bilateral issues, including trade, critical minerals, nuclear energy, defense and energy. Now, sharing details, Jaishankar described it as a good conversation and said both parties agreed to remain in touch on these and other matters. Now, U.S. Ambassador to India Sergio Gore also shared a post calling the talks positive and hinted at a possible meeting between the two next month. According to the principal deputy spokesperson for the United States Department of State, Tommy Pigott, Rubio and the External Affairs Minister Dr. S Jaishankar discussed ongoing bilateral trade agreement negotiations and their shared interest in strengthening economic cooperation. They also exchanged views on regional developments, reaffirming the United States and India's commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. The important telephonic conversation took place at a crucial time against the backdrop of U.S. President Donald Trump's warning that countries doing business with Iran would face a 25% tariff on trade with the United States. The U.S. Ambassador to India, Sergio Gore, also signaled a possible meeting between the two leaders in the next month. U.S. President Donald Trump will attend the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in Davos later this month, leading what organizers say will be the largest ever U.S. delegation, including at least 5 cabinet members. The summit, beginning Jan 18th in Switzerland, is set to draw 64 heads of state or government and top leaders from 6 of the 7 G7 nations. The World Economic Forum says the 5-day meeting will focus heavily on Ukraine, Gaza and Latin America, including Venezuela, China, Pakistan and Ukraine. Will also send large delegations, with President Volodymyr Zelensky attending in person. Now, from India, at least 4 union ministers, Ashwini Vaishnav, Shivraj Singh Chauhan, Prahlad Joshi and K. Ram Mohan Naidu, as well as 6 chief ministers, are expected to be there, along with over 100 top CEOs from the country. Now, Indian leaders will take part in high-level panels, bilateral meetings and discussions on whether India can become the world's 3rd largest economy. Organizers say more than 3,000 global leaders, including political heads, business chiefs and technology leaders, will attend under a theme centered on dialogue at a time of global uncertainty. And a major boost to India's air power, the government is set to consider a 3.25 lakh crore rupee proposal to acquire 114 Rafale fighter jets from France in what could become India's largest ever defense deal. Now, citing top defense sources, the proposal is expected to come up for discussion at a high-level defense ministry meeting over the next 2 to 3 days. Now, under the plan, most of the Rafale jets will be manufactured in India with around 30% indigenous content, while 12 to 18 aircraft are likely to be procured in flyaway condition for the Indian Air Force. Now, as part of the government-to-government deal, India is also seeking France's approval to integrate Indian weapons and indigenous systems on the Rafale platform. Those source codes will remain with the French side. Now, if approved, the deal would take the total number of Rafales in Indian service to 176 aircraft. The Indian Air Force currently operates 36 Rafales, while the Indian Navy has already placed orders for 26 Rafale marine jets. Now, sources say the proposal was submitted by the Indian Air Force to the Defense Ministry a few months ago and will require final clearance from the Cabinet Committee on Security after ministry approval. Notably, India is pushing ahead with the Rafale acquisition even as the United States and Russia have offered their fifth-generation fighters, the F-35 and the Su-57 respectively, to the Indian Air Force. The move comes amid growing regional security challenges following reports of the Rafale's strong performance during Operation Sindoor, where it is said to have successfully countered advanced Chinese PL-15 missiles using its Spectra electronic warfare suite. And on to news coming on the macroeconomy front. India's economic growth is expected to moderate to around 6.5% in FY27, easing from an estimated 7.2% in the current fiscal, according to the World Bank. But remember, the estimates coming from the National Statistics Office here from India stand higher at 7.4% this fiscal. Now, in its latest Global Economic Prospects report, the lender said resilient domestic demand will continue to anchor India's growth even as global headwinds and higher U.S. tariffs weigh on exports. The World Bank noted that the impact of increased tariffs on certain Indian exports to the United States is likely to be offset by stronger than expected domestic momentum, leaving its growth forecast broadly unchanged at 7.2%. The institution also upgraded its FY26 estimate by a sharp 0.9 percentage points to 7.2%, citing robust private consumption, improving rural incomes and the benefits of earlier tax reforms. Government advance estimates, meanwhile, have pegged FY26 growth higher at 7.4%. And staying with India's export story, India's automobile exports recorded a strong surge in the calendar year 2025, led by passenger vehicles and two-wheelers, according to the Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers. Passenger vehicle exports rose 16% year-on-year to 8.63 lakh units, with the December quarter marking the highest ever quarterly exports at 2.25 lakh cars. CM also said demand remains steady across key overseas markets, including the Middle East, Africa and Latin America. Two-wheelers also posted a record performance with 49 lakh units exported in calendar year 2025, up more than 24% from the previous year. Now, on the domestic front, passenger vehicle sales touched a record 44.9 lakh units, driven by festive demand, tax relief, lower GST and easier financing conditions. Two-wheeler sales crossed the 2 crore mark, while commercial vehicle volumes rose nearly 8%, supported by higher freight activity and improving consumption. And with that, let's slip into a very short break. But coming up on the other side, we'll have Gaurang Shah, the Senior Vice President at Geojit Investments, to tell us all that is weighing on the Indian markets. And it seems three big events, the Q3 earnings, which have already started, followed by, of course, the budget announcement and the India-US trade deal, which is still keeping the FIIs in exit mode. All this and more on the other side of the break. You're watching Morning Brief at 9.
डेस्टिनेशन वेडिंग के लिए बजट रोते थे, पर पिक्स कितनी अच्छी आई हैं।
बहुत क्यूट लग रही हो।
ऑब्वियो, अपने दम पे शादी करने का ग्लो।
इनकी जिद ने किया डेस्टिनेशन वेडिंग का सपना सच, अपने दम पर, टाटा कैपिटल पर्सनल लोन्स के साथ।
उछलता है, दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कर आता है, आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया, अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया।
जरा सोच के देखिए,
आपके पास कुछ ऐसा है जो आपकी दुनिया बदल सकता है। जानते हैं क्या? आपका अपना सोना। सोना क्या नहीं कर सकता? सोना आपको अपने सपनों का घर दिला सकता है, आपके बच्चों का भविष्य बना सकता है। सोना आपकी हर इच्छा पूरी कर सकता है। तो भारत की सबसे बड़ी गोल्ड लोन NBFC मुथूट फाइनेंस से गोल्ड लोन लीजिए और फिर देखिए सोना क्या नहीं कर सकता। मुथूट फाइनेंस, जहाँ विश्वास ही परंपरा है। कॉल कीजिए 1-800-313-1212।
With Skoda Supercare and growing network across 180 plus cities, you never drive alone.
Skoda. दूरियां कोई अपनों में ना रहे, दिल में जब उमंग हो, घर है वही जहाँ सब संग हो, रिश्तों को रंग दो, दुनिया को रंग दो।
Birla Opus Paints.
A tall cappuccino with caramel syrup and cardamom.
Sure. A tall cappuccino with caramel syrup and cardamom. Sure.
Tall alfacino with camel ka soup and Cardi ki mom. अदरक वाली चाय पिलाओ ना, कड़क।
सर, मलाई मार के देती हूँ।
लाइफ हो या इन्वेस्टिंग, भीड़ के पीछे मत भागो। म्यूचुअल फंड अपनाओ और खुद के हिसाब से इन्वेस्ट करो।
म्यूचुअल फंड निवेश बाजार जोखिमों के अधीन है। योजना से संबंधित सभी दस्तावेजों को ध्यान से पढ़ें।
Welcome back. You're still watching Morning Brief at 9 right here on News 9. Time to shift focus now to the Lal Street. Markets opened just about 5-6 minutes ago, but they opened really sharply down. But in the last 5 minutes, in fact, the first 5 minutes of trading this morning, we've seen some correction. So as things stand right now, markets seem to be pretty much flat, almost at the same levels that they closed at yesterday. The Nifty 50 holding below the 25,700 mark. That's a negative. And the Sensex now just in the vicinity of about 83,500. Meanwhile, volatility in the Indian stock markets is higher today, up about 2.2% or so at about 11.45%. Mixed cues coming in from the small cap and the mid cap space. We are seeing some buying activity in the small cap space, which is up marginally, but almost an identical selling in the mid cap space. So that's what the charts are telling us. Let's pull up the Nifty 50 heat map and try to see which are the sectors that seem to be in some sort of a pain this morning, as it seems that Reliance has now become more or less flat. This was again one stock that opened relatively high in the negative territory, down about 0.3%, but then we are seeing some buy on dips happening on the RIL stock. Remember, the stock was down almost, in fact, more than 2% in trade yesterday. Meanwhile, even the IT sector seems to be a little bit in a red territory this morning. In fact, TCS saw volatile action in trade yesterday, a day after the announcement of its Q3 results. And after that, we saw some buying activity pushing the stock higher and ending in the green. But this morning, some profit taking pushing the stock back down to about 0.8 or so down below yesterday's closing price. Overall, the consumer durable space is also all right. Maruti Suzuki, Mahindra and Mahindra down, about 0.2 of a percentage point or so. Meanwhile, Bajaj looking higher at about 0.3% or so. Even the banking space started in red but has since pared up its losses. Well, let's put all of this into perspective, not just today's stocks, but overall the market sentiment that we seem to be seeing, where you're seeing some buy on dips and some sell on profit sort of a scenario playing out in markets, and FII is continuing to remain edgy. Gaurang Shah, Senior Vice President at GeoG, joins us this morning. Mr. Shah, thank you so much for your time, sir. First up, help us understand, of course, there is the Q3 earnings season right now. And we've seen two big-ticket TCS and HCL Tech results out already. Now we are looking at Infosys coming out with its set of numbers later today. Overall, I want to first start off with the IT story. How's the Indian IT story looking to you, sir? Because Nifty IT has been in the negative in the last 1 year. In fact, the Nifty IT returns are down almost 12% against the Nifty 50, which has gained about 8.4% or so in the same period. So overall, how do you think the IT story is poised, given the two sets of numbers that you've seen of TCS and HCL Tech so far?
Karthik, morning to you, and thank you for having me on the show on your channel this morning. A small disclosure, because we'll be discussing stock specific. All recommendations that I'll be sharing with you this morning are a part of our fundamental research stream recommendations from a long-term time horizon. Our company, Geojit or I, we do not have any kind of personal investments, no financial interest, no conflict of interest, but we give advice to our clients on similar lines. They might have their investment interest. So, Karthik, speaking about IT sector overall, my sense is that, second quarter, actually reflecting upon the second quarter, because a lot of people were of an opinion that IT sector earnings is going to be a little bit negative, below the weather, blah, blah, whatever. And we had a positive number on the second quarter, third quarter. Because of that labor related issues on the balance sheet, they have taken a little bit of hit, both TCS and HCL Tech. We have many more numbers coming in this week and next week onwards. We structurally, from a long-term point of view, we remain positive with a 1.5 plus kind of time horizon.
Okay.
Valuation-wise, some of the IT company stocks are looking very attractive. AI, data center, and ability to scale up the business on the higher side should be coming in. Acquisitions have already happened, Karthik, which should occur well over a period of time.
Right.
On and off, valuation for that acquisition may be a problem.
All right. I want to specifically, talk one number with you, Mr. Shah, and that happens to be the $1.8 billion of AI revenue that we saw in Q3 for TCS. Does this, in your mind, offset the fears that the Indian IT services sector had missed the AI bus? Do you think they have been able to catch up? Because 1.8 billion out of a total 7.5 billion of revenue in Q3 seems to be a fairly good number, sir.
So, Karthik, let me put it this way. I think rushing into it and creating a situation that we've seen in US and China as far as AI related or data center related stocks are concerned would be something that will be difficult to fathom. It is good that we are taking step by step forward as far as AI is concerned. We are not rushing into it. And I think that's a prudent strategy. Going forward, the kind of verbatim that the management has given with respect to AI and data centers, we remain structurally positive. And I think if you are in AI and if you're not, if you are in IT and if you are not in AI, Karthik, I think your lifeline is very limited. So you need to invest in AI, you need to get that headcount in place, and you need to scale up the operation as far as AI is concerned. And that is pleasantly smoothing to see the kind of number as far as AI revenues are concerned.
All right. Expectations from Infosys. Do you think we'll see similar sort of AI uptake in Infosys, in your opinion, sir?
I think so, Karthik, because, I normally don't make forward-looking statements.
Sure.
But I hope they will do better, or maybe they'll do in line with what the others have done.
All right, so let's move away from the IT sector and just look at the broader context, the mood on the markets right now. Now, there are two aspects playing out, really. There is this tariff threat and now a renewed tariff threat of additional 25% given India's trade with Iran, even though it is minuscule trade, versus trade talks, which yesterday again sort of set off on a positive tone with Dr. S Jaishankar speaking to Marco Rubio. But overall, one would have expected that markets would have reacted a lot more favorably to that phone call last evening. But we haven't really seen that sentiment play out on the markets. And even otherwise, there is this oscillating mood which seems to be confusing investors on whether or not that trade deal is going to happen. If it does, when that's going to happen. Overall, INR continues to remain under pressure while gold prices continue to surge. FII is not really finding any solace in staying invested in the Indian market. So where do you see things for the Indian stock markets at a broad level, not sector specific, going from here?
Karthik, honestly, if you ask me, this is my personal opinion. I think you should keep the tariff-related trade deal in the back burner, because this kind of oscillating that President Trump is doing, and along with him, last week, I believe Mr. Lutnick, I believe, is the Commerce Secretary, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're right.
He made a statement that the train has already left because Prime Minister Modi did not give a call to President Trump. I mean, are you living in an ego world, or are you willing to do something for your country and for the people of your country? You can't be talking this. And then you have the envoy coming into India and saying that, no, everything is hunky-dory and both countries are talking very nicely, etc. So this kind of a flip-flop is something that is not expected out of a developed economy called US and matured people like the President Trump and his group of ministers. Having said that, let it happen the way it has to happen, Karthik. I am honestly saying that, and I've said it many times, I don't think you should surrender to the pressure. I don't think you should put your signature and your seal on a paper which you're not convinced will be for the growth of your country and for the people of your country.
Right.
So let it happen. Let it take time. Absolutely no problem. Till that time, there will be a lot of tantrums that you will be witnessing from President Trump as far as tariffs are concerned. But I think now it's the order of the day,
Right.
to be very honest.
Absolutely.
And our data points are very, very strong domestically.
No, I agree with you, Mr. Shah. But I think the concern really is that in case the trade deal is not to come through, or not to come through in a manner in which, President Donald Trump wants it to come through, then what does this sort of exodus of FIIs mean in the long term for Indian investors who are invested in the India story? Because they are not seeing the kind of growth that they had seen at a time when the sentiment towards India from an FII perspective was a lot more positive.
No, Karthik. It is not what President Trump wants. Okay, it is what both the countries want.
Of course.
So we have to look at both the sides.
Right.
And that's why I said we don't need to surrender. You want to come into agri, you want to come into dairy, you want to come to aquaculture, etc., etc. Bro, we do not have that kind of liberty, because we have a large population dependent on this kind of activities and as far as their survival is concerned. So it is not what President Trump wants. It is what the people of these two countries want and what is beneficial for these two countries. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
Now, whether the deal is going to get done or not, like I said, only future will tell. And as the envoy has mentioned when he landed in India, that there is no replacement for India.
Correct.
So if that is the case, let's sit across the table. Let's discuss and let's iron out the issue.
Okay.
Why is it that we have to surrender to them?
Okay.
I absolutely disagree with this.
Okay, sure. But meanwhile, one third event I want to get your views on is just about 2 weeks away from now is the union budget. So overall, from a market's perspective, Mr. Shah, what are the kind of budget expectations in your mind doing the rounds? Number one, is it going to offer support to the manufacturing sector? Because again, to not just offset the tariffs, but overall for India's growth, we really need to pump up the manufacturing sector. And apart from a few sectors like electronics and perhaps automobile, we haven't really seen the kind of manufacturing push that one would have expected to see, given all the efforts that the government has been trying to make for the last 10 years, from Make in India to Atmanirbhar Bharat to the PLI schemes. And more importantly, this entire private capex incentivization, do you think we are going to see a lot more of that in budget 2026? Because at the end of the day, job creation also happens to be a central focus for the government, doesn't it?
So employment generation, creating job opportunities, and let me say one thing, Karthik, that private capex will only happen once the level of that capex has reached a particular level, and then there is a need. When your level is not reached, who will want to invest? Because you need to utilize your existing capacities. So I think that will happen. I think government last year, what they did with respect to GST Avatar 2.0, good monsoon, good demand from semi-urban rural India. Last year in the budget, Honorable Finance Minister gave a break for 12.75 lakhs salarized people income, no tax. That will all translate into positivity as we go into this 2026 calendar year. Expectation from the budget, I think complexities should be removed. Clarity should come in with related to tax structure.
Okay.
So every time the budget comes, long-term, short-term capital gains tax, removing STT, etc., comes into effect. But I think whatever we've seen over the last 5-10 years of this particular government and the budget, I think they will walk the line of prudence and financial discipline.
Okay.
And I think wisdom will definitely prevail upon them, and they'll use their fine sense of judgment while delivering the budget. I'm absolutely 100% sure about it.
Okay.
And it is not going to be a populist budget. Let me be very, very clear.
All right, not a populist budget, despite the fact that two big states are going into elections this year, which is West Bengal and Tamil Nadu. But I'll not push you on that, Mr. Shah. I want to understand, sectorally, do you think there is going to be a massive push on manufacturing, especially for the MSME sectors that seem to be, at least for now, taking the biggest hit when it comes to the impact of the tariff?
So I think that's going to be one of the priorities that the Honorable Finance Minister will be focusing on. And I'm sure even here, whatever hurdles are there, they need to be cleared off in a disciplined manner, and bring in policies. So that's one particular sector. And of course, my sense is that and you said about Manufacturing. I think manufacturing is taken a leap as far as defense is concerned, Karthik.
Right.
And my sense is that from only being innovator, I think we have to invest into R&D also as far as defense. So sectorally speaking, defense, cap goods engineering, entire BFSI segment, Karthik, looks very attractive. Autos and consumption related themes.
All right, so those are the budget themes. Let's leave it at that. Mr. Gaurang, always a pleasure having you here with us on News9. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Karthik.
And with that, we will slip into a very short break. A lot more coming up from around the world on the Morning Brief at 9. Stay tuned.
इंडिया, ये तेरे लिए, तेरा नाम गूंजे, ये जिद है मेरी।
नए फैसलों के साथ तू आगे बढ़े, ये जिद है मेरी।
तेरे घर सपनों से बने, जिद छे मारी।
तेरे हर इरादे को हौसला मिले, जिद ए अमर।
जब तो बोले तो दुनिया सुने, पिडिवादम एने ये
मेरी कहानी से इंडिया की कामयाबी लिखूं। जिद है साडी। जब आप अपनी तरक्की की जिद पर अड़ते हो तो इंडिया की जीत होती है। इस जिद में आपके साथ गर्व से है टाटा कैपिटल। टाटा कैपिटल, जिद तरक्की की।
दूरियां कोई अपनों में ना रहे, दिल में जब उमंग हो, घर है वही जहाँ सब संग हो, रिश्तों को रंग दो, दुनिया को रंग दो।
Birla Opus Paints.
उछलता है, दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है, आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया, अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया।
A tall cappuccino with caramel syrup and cardamom.
Sure. A tall cappuccino with caramel syrup and cardamom. Sure.
Tall alfacino with camel syrup and cardamom, mom. अदरक वाली चाय पिलाओ ना, कड़क।
सर, मलाई मार के देती हूँ।
लाइफ हो या इन्वेस्टिंग, भीड़ के पीछे मत भागो। म्यूचुअल फंड अपनाओ और खुद के हिसाब से इन्वेस्ट करो।
म्यूचुअल फंड निवेश बाजार जोखिमों के अधीन है। योजना से संबंधित सभी दस्तावेजों को ध्यान से पढ़ें।
You're watching News9. This is Morning Brief at 9. Now, all the stories that we're tracking for you from around the world. Here's a look at them. U.S. President Donald Trump threatens very strong actions if Iran carries out executions of detained protesters. Tehran dismisses warnings as a pretext for possible U.S. military intervention. Now, during a visit to Detroit, U.S. President Donald Trump highlights manufacturing gains and inflation-fighting efforts as the White House moves to calm voter unease over rising household expenses. Donald Trump dismisses criticism from JP Morgan boss Jamie Dimon, doubling down on attacks against the Federal Reserve and insisting the central bank is mismanaged and must cut interest rates. The Trump administration cancels more than 100,000 visas in 2025, including 8,000 student visas, citing criminal activity. President Trump wants neutralized citizens convicted of fraud could lose citizenship too. U.S. consumer prices rise in December 2025, driven by higher rents and food costs as shutdown distortions fade, reinforcing expectations the Federal Reserve will pause rate cut at its next meeting. Washington formally opens the door for NVIDIA to sell advanced AI chips to China under restrictions, cementing President Trump's recent reversal of Biden-era export controls. Danish pharma giant Novo Nordisk says weight loss drugs could account for over a third of the global obesity market by 2030, signaling rapid growth as early as next year. Boeing secures nearly 1,200 aircraft orders in 2025, overtaking Airbus for the first time in 6 years as demand rebounds despite ongoing production challenges. And China reports total trade rose 3.8% last year to a record level, underscoring export resilience despite global slowdown risks and mounting geopolitical tensions. U.S. President Donald Trump on Tuesday highlighted his economic record during a visit to Detroit, seeking to refocus attention on American manufacturing and efforts to ease high consumer costs. The White House is aiming to reassure voters amid growing economic anxiety among American households.
In a sprawling speech in Detroit on Tuesday, President Donald Trump boasted that he had rebuilt the U.S. economy in the span of 11 months, as he sought to refocus attention on U.S. manufacturing and his efforts to tackle high consumer costs.
Growth is exploding, productivity is soaring, investment is booming, incomes are rising. Inflation is defeated. America is respected again like never before.
But higher costs for food and rent drove consumer prices higher in December, and job growth has been weak. Unhappiness over affordability played out in Reuters Ipsos polls last month, which found approval for Trump on cost of living issues was just 27%. And while Trump was in Michigan ahead of the Detroit Auto Show, the outlook for factories is grim. Employment fell nationwide by 8,000 jobs last month, dipping below levels seen in much of his first term. Aides have said that this year, ahead of the midterms, Trump is set to travel around the country to directly speak to voters about his economic accomplishments. However, Tuesday's speech, which was billed as economy-focused, saw Trump zigzag from one topic to the next, including immigration, former President Joe Biden, transgender athletes, and Venezuela.
Winning is a good thing. We're going to work with Venezuela. We'll make that country very strong again.
Last week, sources told Reuters that GOP lawmakers and White House aides, including Vice President J.D. Vance, were frustrated with Trump's focus on Venezuela. They want him to address economic and health care worries in an election year that may shape into an uphill battle.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump on Tuesday dismissed criticism from J.P. Morgan Chase chief executive Jamie Dimon over his administration's attack on the Federal Reserve, insisting the central bank is poorly run and should cut interest rates. On a call with reporters on Tuesday, Dimon said that anything that chips away at Fed independence is not a good idea, warning it could increase inflation expectations and ultimately lead to higher interest rates. Remember, President Trump has often criticized Powell's role as the chief of America's central bank, adding that his team was unnecessarily extended under former President Joe Biden.
Jamie Dimon said today that it's not a great idea to be chipping away at the Fed's independence. Do you think Jamie Dimon's wrong about that?
Yeah, I think it's fine what I'm doing. We have a bad Fed person. He was extended by Biden, and yeah, I think he's wrong. I think it's wrong. He's done a bad job. We should have lower rates. Jamie Dimon probably wants higher rates. Maybe he makes more money that way.
Meanwhile, the heads of several major central banks across the world issued a rare joint statement backing U.S. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell after the Trump administration threatened him with a criminal indictment. Now, the move has drawn criticism from global financial lenders and even some members of Trump's own Republican Party. Take a look.
Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell received major support on Tuesday. The heads of many of the world's leading central banks issued a rare joint statement backing him. It was in response to the Trump administration's threat of a criminal indictment for the Fed chair. Powell is at the center of a U.S. administration criminal probe about the renovation of the Fed's headquarters. He called it a pretext to win presidential influence over interest rates. The heads of the European Central Bank, the Bank of England, the Bank of Canada and 8 other institutions all backed Powell. They said he acted with integrity. They added central bank independence was crucial for keeping prices and financial markets stable. The statement said, "We stand in full solidarity with the Federal Reserve System and its chair, Jerome H. Powell." The US probe has already drawn criticism from the world of finance and some key members of Trump's Republican Party. Central bankers fear political influence over the Fed could hurt trust in the bank's commitment to its inflation target. This would lead to higher inflation and global financial market volatility. The US would likely export this higher inflation through financial markets since it is the world's top economy. That would make it more difficult for other central banks to keep prices stable.
Staying with more stories from the US, the United States has revoked more than 100,000 visas in 2025 as part of a broad immigration crackdown, including around 8,000 student visas, citing criminal activity. The US State Department said most revocations involved overstays, while others were linked to encounters with law enforcement. President Donald Trump also warned that naturalized citizens convicted of fraud could face loss of citizenship. Listen in.
We're also going to revoke the citizenship of any naturalized immigrant from Somalia or anywhere else who is convicted of defrauding our citizens. We're going to get them the hell out of here fast. And if you come to America to rob Americans, we're throwing you in jail and we're sending you back to the place from where you came. We're throwing you right in jail. And they know it too.
U.S. consumer prices rose in December of 2025, driven by higher rents and food costs as distortions linked to a government shutdown unwound. The data has strengthened expectations that the Federal Reserve will keep interest rates unchanged at its next meeting.
U.S. consumer prices increased in December, lifted by higher costs for rent and food, after a government shutdown had artificially lowered inflation in November. In the 12 months through December, the Consumer Price Index advanced 2.7%, matching November's gain. The increase in the CPI was in line with economists' expectations. The report from the Labor Department cemented expectations that the Federal Reserve would leave interest rates unchanged this month. But rate cuts this year remain on the table, as underlying inflation pressures moderated last month. President Donald Trump said the December inflation figures supported his push for Fed Chair Jerome Powell to cut interest rates. In a post on social media, Trump said the inflation numbers mean Powell should cut interest rates, quote, meaningfully. But food prices increased by the most in more than 3 years and rents remained high, which underscored the affordability crisis facing Trump. High inflation has eroded Trump's approval ratings and will be a political hot button this year as he and his fellow Republicans battle to retain control of Congress. An escalation in tensions between Powell and Trump has left most economists not expecting a rate cut before Powell's term ends in May. Meanwhile, the Trump administration has opened a criminal investigation into Powell, which the Fed chief called a pretext to influence rates.
All right, time for another very short break. We'll be back with a lot more. Keep watching News 9. This is Morning Brief at 9.
उछलता है दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कर आता है आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया
Welcome back. You're still watching News 9. This is Morning Brief at 9. Well, Cubans are preparing for tougher times after U.S. President Donald Trump vowed to block Venezuelan oil supplies to the island. The move threatens to deepen blackouts and shortages in Cuba, already grappling with a severe economic crisis. Take a look.
Many Cubans are worried they could be left in the dark after U.S. President Donald Trump vowed to cut off a lifeline of Venezuelan oil from reaching Cuba. Venezuela was once Cuba's top supplier, but according to shipping data and internal documents from Venezuela's state-owned oil and gas company, it has not sent crude or fuel to Cuba for about a month. That's due to a U.S. naval blockade even before the capture of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. Some Cubans say that without fuel, daily life will be more difficult. Dianira Gonzalez, who lives in Havana's countryside, prepares her children's lunch over charcoal because, she says, electricity is spotty.
What's going to happen? If Donald Trump doesn't let fuel into Cuba, we're going to be without fuel, even for lighting. We'll be in the dark with the children in need, because what are we going to use for light? What are we going to cook for the children if not with charcoal?
Drivers, too, are feeling the strain.
We
have lines here for 24, 48, 72 hours. And that has an impact because 24 hours here means 24 hours without income. People who are in hospitals and who sometimes have to wait or have to leave in another car because the car they are assigned doesn't have fuel to run, and that definitely has a serious impact here on Cuban society.
Tensions are rapidly escalating between the U.S. and Cuba. In a recent social media post, Trump said no more Venezuelan oil or money would go to Cuba following the capture of Maduro, and suggested it should strike a deal with Washington. So far, Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel has made clear his government will stand firm against U.S. threats. Now, Cuba's residents wonder how long the communist-run island can hold out in the face of vastly reduced oil imports. There is no public information about how much oil Cuba may be holding in reserve. It is also unclear whether Cuba's political allies would be willing to risk Trump's ire to help bail out Cuba.
And moving on now, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said alliance members will soon hold talks on Arctic security amid U.S. President Donald Trump's renewed push to take control of Greenland. Now, this comes as Greenland's Prime Minister said on Tuesday his nation would rather remain part of Denmark than become a territory of the United States.
All agree in NATO, we all agree that when it comes to the protection of the Arctic, we have to work together. And that's exactly what we are doing. Then, of course, I'm never commenting when there are discussions between allies. That's not up for me to comment on. But I can assure you that there is complete agreement that when it comes to the assessment of the urgency of the security situation, not only in the Baltic Sea, not only on the eastern flank, but also in the Arctic and in the southern neighborhood, obviously also. But now, concentrating on the Arctic, we all work together.
And finally, from a major Apple-Google AI partnership to breakthrough technology improving life for the visually impaired, we leave you with a roundup of the biggest developments shaping the tech world this week.
From Apple and Google doing a deal to glasses for the blind, this is Tech Weekly. Apple and Google owner Alphabet have done a deal. The iPhone maker will use Google's Gemini models for its revamped Siri coming later this year. It deepens their alliance in the AI era and boosts Alphabet's position in the race against OpenAI. Google's technology already drives much of Samsung's Galaxy AI. But the Siri deal unlocks a massive market with Apple's base of more than 2 billion active devices. And there's no sign Apple's dominance of global smartphones has let up. The firm led the sector with a 20% share of the market last year, just ahead of Samsung. Leading analyst Counterpoint Research said the firm saw solid demand in emerging and mid-sized markets and enjoyed strong sales of the iPhone 17 series. The latest innovations in the tech sector were on show at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. Lumen showed off its so-called glasses for the blind. The device goes on a person's head and acts in a similar way to a guide dog. The firm said the glasses use haptics to help people with blindness go about daily life and employs AI to distinguish between safe and unsafe surfaces. A new robo-taxi design was unveiled in Vegas. It's the product of a partnership between EV maker Lucid, Uber and autonomous vehicle tech firm Nuro. The car uses NVIDIA's AI driving hardware and can drive itself in certain conditions without a human using Nuro's autonomous tech. David Salguero is Nuro's head of communications.
We use an AI autonomy foundation model that basically learns as it goes along. So as we're driving, as we're testing, both on road and in simulations, it gets better and better at driving.
The group plans to launch robo-taxi services in the San Francisco Bay Area later this year. And AI wearables were on show in Vegas too. Some of the wearable tech included rings, jewelry, exoskeletons and glasses. AI jewelry company Nerva showed products it claims can track your mood and record a journal of your day, while tech firm Eyeball demonstrated noise-cancelling headphones which they said can detect pollution and purify the air in front of your face.
झूलता उछल